Some OHL action for you on today's episode with updates on Sam Dickinson and Henry Mews from the 2024 draft and much more coming up on Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects rated for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalakash, joined by Sebastian. We've got a stacked OHL-focused episode for you today, with a special focus on the Ottawa 67s, ironically. So we'll start off with updates on Sam Dickinson and Henry Mews. We each watch a game of those two players, so we'll be able to give you kind of updates on where we stand about them, what's impressed us, all that stuff. Then our second segment, we'll talk about a standout D pairing in Sault Ste. Marie of Andrew Gibson and Arttu Kärki. Both have been up to fantastic results so far and have been looking really good. And we'll also give a quick shout out to Brady Stonehouse, who just signed his ELC with the Edmonton Oilers, a favorite of Sebastian's. And then we'll end things off with a segment recorded with Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets, where we talked about Luca Pinelli. But before we get into any of that, just make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always very much appreciated. So let's start off with, Bill, talk me through what you saw from Henry Mews in the game you just scouted.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Ottawa is a bit of a weird team this season. They've been stripped of most of their talent with players like Pavel Mintyukov and Logan Morrison and Vincenz Rohr and Jack Mateer, who were all playing massive roles last season, having graduated at this point. So it is kind of like the team of like the young blood now, with Luca Pinelli having been named captain and Henry Mews being like the most effective defender on the team now, which was not really the case last season. And in that new role, as in the home opener for Ottawa, he played a pretty quiet game. Henry Mews is not the type of player that's going to stand out in the same way that fellow OHLer Zane Parekh will, in terms of being super dynamic offensively. But he was able to flash his high-end mobility. He's really, really mobile in all four directions. It's a big strength of his. But I mainly saw that in his defensive play. Offensively, he seemed pretty hesitant to activate super high up into the offensive zone, which surprised me a little bit because he played almost half of his games last season at forward for Ottawa. So I'm hoping for a bit more like offensive output and, more importantly, offensive like attempts from Mews and really pushing his capabilities in the offensive zone to try to create something, because Ottawa doesn't really have many creators anymore. Like Luca Pinelli is really the only one that has really shown it at a consistent level in the OHL so far, whereas the rest of the team is still so young and developing. So it's very important for the team that Mews is able to make that jump, and he'll get every opportunity. So we'll see how that progresses from here. But so far, I'm a little bit skeptical in terms of the top 15 or top 20 like draft pick upside with Henry Mews, despite the high-end tool that skating is. There's just a bit of a lack of a complementary toolkit to that mobility as of right now. But if he's able to find his footing in a particular role this season with Ottawa and develop his game in a certain direction, I think it would be very beneficial to him, because having played his entire D-1 season kind of split between forward and defense, he hasn't had much consistency in terms of role responsibilities. So it'll be really, really important for him this season to not only etch out a consistent role on Ottawa's top pairing, but to try to find some stability in the responsibilities and the style that he decides to undertake for the season.
Makes sense, for sure. Now, with Henry Mews, kind of what's your projection for him draft-wise so far? Like, what's your range for him?
I think right now my range is probably like 18 to 25, 18 to 30. I think the mobility is an excellent tool, and I think you can build around it for sure. And there are flashes of defensive upside, and he's a really accurate and intelligent shooter. He's not one to really shoot into shin pads from the point. He likes to advance into the high slot. He delays on his release. He gets pucks on net, which I think is also a decent basis to work off of in the offensive zone as like a tool to diffuse pressure when he's pressured at the point. But I think he needs a lot more diversity in his game to unlock that top 15 upside at the draft.
Yeah, it makes sense for sure. I see him kind of he reminds me a bit of Hunter Brzustewicz at times, a bit of that passiveness, a bit of that skating ability and creativity on the puck, but a lot of areas regarding decision making and processing that still kind of need some work. But moving on to Sam Dickinson, because I think that this is a discussion that needs to be had. The recent game I just watched of his against the North Bay Battalion is probably the best game of defensive hockey I've ever seen any prospect play in the last 3-4 years. Like oh my goodness!
High praise.
The first period alone, I was marveling at how often he was disrupting play. So I just started counting them. He had like 16 excellent defensive plays where he either stopped a prime scoring chance or intercepted the puck just as a player was going to go in on the goal or that kind of thing. Like so many like different details were done very, very right by Sam Dickinson in this game that I just watched. I mean, you're looking at a player who stick positioning, angling, agility, especially his fluidity really helps in the way that he kind of defends, but it's just the decision making is so consistently good. He breaks up plays so well because he activates at just the right time, at just the right pace on him, and he's so strong. Like his leg strength is so powerful that like one push and he's covered 10 feet of ice, and he's able to close gaps with one push effortlessly. You look at him right now with London, you're looking at a man against boys. Like it's absurd how physically developed he is, but it's not a detriment to his overall technique or game or anything like that. I mean, you look at his board battles and you'd expect a guy with that kind of range, that kind of strength to just outpower players, to outmuscle them. But his leverage is really good. His technique along the boards is really good. And 90% of the time he's defending with a stick, first and foremost. So it's not like he's causing, himself to kind of develop habits that won't work at the next level. He's like Caden Gooley on drugs. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, just without the violence, I'm talking just the pure defensive ability it's just amazing from the game that I've watched so far. And I'm still not convinced of the offensive upside, even though he scored a beautiful goal in that game. And the only only goal his team scored. And yes, he's up to 6 points in 4 games. My concern is that 5 of those points came on the power play, and I believe 4 of them were secondary assists. So it's not like it's an inflated total. And when you look at his habits, his tendency to kind of default to simple plays, his struggle when it comes to kind of longer or mid-range passes is certainly obvious. But the small area game for him is just on lock. The way he's able to first he constantly scans, so he always knows what's going on in his immediate surroundings. And all it takes is just a slip backhand pass between a player's legs or a little saucer along the boards, that kind of thing. And he's able to work his way out of trouble in small ice. My question is he able to open up his playmaking range in order to become a more complete playmaker? Because if he starts hitting those mid to long range passes, oh my goodness. And also if he stops defaulting to shots, I believe he took like 13, 14 shot attempts in that game.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. But yeah, for me right now, Sam Dickinson looks like a surefire, kind of top 5, borderline top 10 pick. He's that good. I'm very much convinced with the game that I've just watched of him. And obviously like these rankings are going to change as we go on, but he's really sold me on his kind of top pair defenseman, kind of Jakub Slavin type of build, and I'm very, very intrigued. But yeah, any thoughts on him to end things off?
He's very, very good. I think with the offensive game specifically, one big thing that I really, really want to see him apply is his defensive ability in small areas to kind of translate that to the offensive zone, because so far this season and in his D-1 tape, I've seen him attack open space right in the slot when it is like gaping. But when it's a little bit more enclosed, he's a little bit more hesitant to kind of take the risk to jump up into that space with the fear of turning the puck over. And he has the puck skills in my eyes to be able to take those risks a lot more regularly without them really biting him. And I think would unlock some more offensive upside. So hopefully he's able to apply that as the season continues. But yeah, the defensive game is very, very impressive for sure.
Ridiculous, man. Wraps things up for our first segment about Sam Dickinson and Henry Mews. Now we'll talk about some OHL standouts, a deep pair that's working really well right now in Sault Ste. Marie and Brady Stonehouse in this next segment here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Our next partner is Game Time. Game Time is an awesome app that helps you get last-minute tickets at great deals. There are often some situations where I find myself with an afternoon free out of nowhere at the last minute, and I feel like going and watching a local game, whether that's the Montreal Canadiens or the Montreal Alouettes, or basically any team you're looking to see at the last minute. Game Time is a great option. Honestly, I've used them for the longest time, especially given that my schedule is so unpredictable, and sometimes within a 30 minutes notice, I've got my afternoon free and I'm able to go and watch a game. They've helped me out really well. They're obsessed with finding you the best deals as well. They have deals on ticket right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's really the place to get last minute seats. You can find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, hockey, comedy, anything you want, they've got you covered. With zone deals, you can pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% of savings. And the Game Time guarantee makes sure that you always get the best price. If you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what you're seeing on Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out by buying tickets with Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code. It's LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. You can download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. You can also check them out at gametime.co. Check it out. Alrighty, so moving on to our next segment here as we talk about the deep pairing of Andrew Gibson and Arttu Kärki. A deep pairing that is just tearing it up in Sault Ste. Marie right now and doing really well together. I'm really astounded and surprised, pleasantly surprised that Andrew Gibson is putting up these kinds of numbers. What was it, 8 points in 4 games?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I like Andrew Gibson, but not to the extent that I saw that as predictable. He's kind of more of the shutdown, stay at home type of player. You rarely see him activate hard and kind of go on runs with the puck and that kind of thing. He's the polar opposite of Lane Hutson, and that has its benefits. But man,
and Arttu Kärki actually,
yeah. I mean, that's a complementary pair if I've ever seen one, right?
100%. Oh my God. They are both fundamentally flawed players, but they have opposite flaws. And I was quite a decently big fan I Arttu Kärki last season. I know I liked him more than most other Dauber scouts. I think I pushed for him a little bit higher up our board than he would have landed otherwise. But Andrew Gibson was a player that I really struggled with last season, and I was quite astounded to see him picked as high as he went at 42, 43 to Detroit.
Something like that, yeah.
But the early returns I still have some pretty big concerns over his skating and his overall decision making with the puck. But hey, I mean, 8 points in 4 games is really impressive. We'll see how that continues, considering he scored 23 points in the entirety of last season. But playing with a player like Arttu Kärki, whose offensive game is predicated on skill and playmaking creativity, I think is a great match, and I think it benefits both, though I would expect the point totals to skew more towards Kärki as the season progresses than towards Gibson. But anyways, I think this is a very complimentary pairing, and the early returns are awesome. What's your take on the pairing, Hattie?
I find it very interesting that these two players ended up together. First, I wasn't aware Arttu Kärki was going to Soo. That was news to me. So seeing him and Gibson on the same pair, it just really makes me laugh because, like you said, they're completely opposite players with completely opposite development objectives and flaws. But they complement each other very well, and you can see that so far this season. I feel like Gibson is definitely a bit more tools in it than I thought he was initially. even though the skating and decision making isn't ideal, I didn't expect his shot to be that powerful. I didn't expect his playmaking ability to be decently solid, and he's got good hands. I mean, it's nothing out of this world, but he's a lot more toolsy in terms of puck skills than I thought he was. And Kärki is exactly as advertised. Just electrifying on the puck, really good with it. Kind of a deer in the headlights without it, but it'll be interesting to see these two guys kind of develop and evolve as players. What do you think? What do you think is the ceiling still for Andrew Gibson? Do you think this was a kind of the pickup at 42 that we look back at and kind of like the cider pick, but to a lesser extent, be like, yeah, maybe the Red Wings are onto something here, you know?
I'm still a little bit skeptical. Like four games into his D+1 season, I'm not going to really shift my perspective too much just yet. Mm-hmm. I still see him as a player that I think a lot of NHL coaches are going to like, considering the style with which he plays the game. But I think in terms of on-ice value, I still see him topping out as a bottom pairing piece. But I think his likelihood of hitting that ceiling is increasing. And I think that being picked where he was already improves his chances a little bit there. And considering that Detroit already just traded away kind of their stalwart defensive third pairing guy in Gustav Lindstrom, who might be on the waiver wire pretty soon in Montreal, Gibson could be like kind of the heir apparent to that subtle but important role for any contending team.
Absolutely makes sense. Now, real quick to end things off, I'll let you take it away on one of your favorite prospects, a player you've mentioned to me more times than I can count. Brady Stonehouse just signed his entry-level contract with the Edmonton Oilers out of their rookie camp. He was a really good player on the Ottawa 67, but not a player I necessarily saw getting drafted in this past draft. But you had him high. You had him really high.
I mean, I've had him ranked both of the last two drafts. I wouldn't say I had him super, super high. I mean, I didn't pick him for team high in either draft. Like he's been kind of on the brink of draft talent for me. Yeah. Where he's a player that every single shift I watch him play, I'm just giggling. He's so much fun. He plays the style that, in my eyes, makes him project as a potential future, like, decade-long fourth liner. He plays with tremendous grit. He's really been refining his tools year after year. I've been watching him progress since his rookie season in the OHL with a ton of live viewings, and it's been such a steady progression, but his identity as a player hasn't shifted a bit. He's still the same pesty, undersized power forward that he's always been. And he kind of plays the Michael Pezzetta role. But I like him a little bit more than what I've seen of Pezzetta going back to his OHL years. Yeah. And I'm very, very happy that he's gotten ELC because I think he deserves it. And I think Edmonton's a team where he'll actually fit in quite nicely with that because they have a very shallow prospect pool. And this is the type of player who genuinely within the next 2 to 3 years could be a pretty solid fourth line piece. And while the ceiling isn't the highest beyond that, he's going to get every opportunity this season with Ottawa to score a ton in the OHL. This is a very, very shallow team this year, and he is the most established offensive player apart from Luca Pinelli on the roster. So he's going to get the first line opportunities, and while that might be a role that slightly exceeds his capabilities, I'm really curious to kind of see what he's able to do with it this year. And I think for Oilers fans, this is the type of player who, whether he caps out as a high-end AHLer or fourth liner in the NHL, is a player that you are going to adore watching play. He makes you happy deep down as a hockey fan. He never takes a shift off. He's a really effective forechecker. He has a really solid wrist shot. He's constantly driving the slot. And while he's undersized, he has the highest motor and he has a really strong lower body, and he rarely gets knocked off his feet. He's really quite powerful with the puck. His handling and playmaking games have come a long way since his rookie season. And while defensively, he probably won't be much above replacement value, at the end of the day, he's going to apply pressure, and he's a pretty solid F1, and he's a ton of fun, and I really, really am cheering for this player because he's really won his way into my heart, at the very least as a hockey fan, and a bit less from a scouting perspective, but I think that NHL ceiling is certainly within the realm of possibility, and I know quite a few people that are quite close in terms of watching a ton of OHL hockey are really big fans of him too. Guys like Brock Otten, for instance. Like Stonehouse has kind of made himself a name in like the underground OHL scouting community as a super likable, high intensity player, and I think the Oilers are getting a really nice piece out of this.
100%. But that wraps things up for our second segment. And now we'll talk. Now we'll have Jay Forster on in order to discuss Luca Pinelli. He comes over from Locked On Blue Jackets to discuss some prospects with us. That's coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose, that you can use on anything, ranging from spreads to player props to over and unders and far more. There's really no better time to join FanDuel than right now, so get in on the action. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Let's finish off with one last prospect. And for the listeners, I do want to make sure that you know that this was a prospect that Sebastian requested we talk about. And I was like, absolutely. I'm always happy to talk about this guy. We had him on the show last month. Super great kid. We're going to talk a little bit about Luca Pinelli, who just got named captain of the Ottawa 67s. I believe scored the first goal of the preseason for them.
I was there for it. Yes, he did.
And
of the regular season, actually.
Oh, of the regular season. Excuse me.
Yeah.
He opened the scoring.
He's on it.
This season.
He's on it.
And is another one of those players that, like Malatesta, like Gavin Brindley, plays the game at like 125 miles an hour or nothing, and there's no real in between. So, what's your let's just start off with what's your elevator pitch scouting report on Pinelli?
Well, I started watching him 2 years ago and fell in love with him the first game I scouted. And last season, he basically played 0 games at center and had like the worst power play role, and his usage was awful, like infuriating the entire season. And this season, I was expecting him to probably either get traded out of Ottawa because the coach clearly didn't trust him, or play a role way smaller than what he deserved. And instead, he's now the captain and the 1C. So I'm thrilled about it. I'm very happy that he's getting this opportunity because I believe in this player so much. Luca Pinelli is a hyper-intelligent and skilled forward who has a really high motor. He's really intelligent defensively. He's perhaps not the most dynamic player with the puck on his stick in the world. Not the best scale, not the fastest or paciest player in the world, but he's really agile. He's really deceptive. He's really smart. Again, his value boils down to his intelligence. He uses his line mates so incredibly well. Last season, for the beginning part of the season, Ottawa had the best top line in the entire CHL, and it consisted of Pinelli, Vincenz Rohr, who was a 3rd-round pick at the Habs, and Tyler Boucher, famous 10th overall draft pick. And jokes aside, that was a fantastic line, and it fit so perfectly because Pinelli was the clock that made that line tick, because he was the hyper-intelligent piece on that line that would distribute the puck. He would basically control the pace of play of the line itself. Basically, think of Luca Pinelli as like a really nerfed Zach Benson. He has some of the same capabilities where he's really, really intense as a skater. He's super intelligent. He's not the fastest. Skating is definitely something that he still has to work on a little bit. The defensive game isn't quite as strong as Benson's, obviously, but it is a strength. And he's a really, really good leader on the ice. I've been a really big fan of him in every single high stakes game I've watched Ottawa play in the last couple seasons. He's always one of the couple players that steps it up big time in those situations. And this is one of those players that I just adore watching. He's been developed kind of into a finisher with the 67s, where he's kind of used as a trigger man on the power play. But I'm hoping that this year, considering he got his role got switched from being like that right hash mark trigger man because he's a left shot, he's now instead the left dot distributor, which is a way better role for him. And I'm really happy because he's a true dual threat from there. He can either send in a wrist shot, which is how he scored that first goal of the season, or he can distribute to any of his 4 options on the ice. Whereas where he was last season, he was purely a finisher. Whenever he got the puck, his instruction was to shoot the puck. And that limited his value a ton because he's such a capable passer when he is told to pass the puck and he's in a position to do so. And while his playmaking game really couldn't develop much last season because of those role restrictions, I'm quite hopeful that he's able to work on that this year and maybe work in his playmaking to kind of match his finishing again, because as a rookie, he was a stronger playmaker than he was a goal scorer. It was really only last season where that shifted completely into the goal scoring direction. So yeah, that's my 8-minute long elevator pitch, long elevator ride.
Listen, we all have prospects that we can talk about forever, so I respect it. What kind of ceiling do you think he has? Obviously, he's literally 18 years old right now. He's probably going to be 2 years away from the AHL, spend some time there, and then move to the NHL after that. Yeah. But like, do you see him as kind of middle six talent for the NHL, or what do you think his floor to ceiling is?
Yeah, middle six is the comfortable projection for me. I think that if you get a second liner out of Luca Pinelli, it's because his development has gone quite well. I think there is definitely that ceiling. I just think that he really does, like, a lot of it hitches on how he's used in Ottawa now in the next 2 years. Like, coaching and overall usage is one of the biggest factors in development and doesn't really get talked about too much. Like, junior coaches have so much power in terms of deciding which prospects develop at a faster rate than others. So it will depend on that. Though recent interviews with Dave Cameron, Ottawa's coach, have made it seem like Pinelli is one of his absolute favorite players, which I never would have guessed, considering I went to every game last season. That was not on my radar as a possibility, but hearing that was really great because it means that hopefully this season Pinelli is going to get every opportunity possible, and clearly at least to start the season. I mean, the fact that he's playing at center and the fact that he has that prime distributor role in the power play were the two things that I was yelling for the entirety of last year that I never got once. And then to start the season, it's already there. And it's like, okay, this is great. So that's already trending in the right direction for me. But yeah, I think middle six upside is where I would be hopeful for. I don't think top line upside is really within the realm of possibilities here. But he has a great fallback game where he's this intense, intelligent, possible third line piece who definitely comes in with some clutch goals and assists here and there, but can be trusted to just be a really solid 200-foot intelligent player who does a little bit of everything quite well. And his intelligence and hopefully the finishing ability are then the two things that really set him apart from the rest of the pack. So I'm hopeful for him to develop to that type of middle six role for a really long time. But he's not a sure thing either. I had him higher up on my draft ranking earlier on the season. I think he was as high up as like 15th overall on my board at some point, pretty early on, maybe like December of last year. And he finished up, I think, in like 45 or something. Like he was in my 40s, I think, which was lower than my heart had him. I definitely wanted him higher than that. At heart, I had him at 50. Yeah, like my heart had him at like 25. But in the end, there are some tool limitations there that were concerning to me. And honestly, the coaching was a big reason that I dropped him far on my board, because I was like, well, if this kid's going to be stuck not getting many opportunities with Ottawa for the next 2 seasons, I don't like his chances anymore. And just the fact, like, if fingers crossed, his utilization continues as it started in that home opener for Ottawa, I could have ranked him as high up as like 35 on my board. Like, that was already a pretty big gap, was just like uncertainty of how he's developed in the couple years after being drafted. So that's already a pretty good green flag to start off with here. But yeah, Pinelli is one of my absolute favorite players. I've loved scouting him. He's a joy to watch. Fans are going to adore him. Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of finish off. I went to look. It looks like both of his regular line mates from last season are playing elsewhere this season. Yeah. Tyler Boucher's aged out, obviously, and it looks like Rohr has gone back to Switzerland.
Yeah.
So I guess on the one hand, that's him losing his 2 regular line mates, which is probably going to impact his production. On the other hand,
Yeah,
I feel like it gives him a chance to be the guy in
for sure.
Ottawa, which is probably going to be really good. Obviously, he's been
Yeah.
given the captaincy. He is the
Yeah.
1C until further notice. If they can
Yeah.
find 2 more line mates for him to click with, that could be a really positive thing. How do you do the pros outweigh the cons there? Do you think?
I don't know about that. I like Ottawa has been stripped basically. Like this is now Luca Pinelli's team. When last season the team had players like again like Roar Boucher, Pavel Mintyukov, Jack Mateer, Logan Morrison was excellent. Cameron Tolnai was an overager who basically got every single big defensive draw and was like that stalwart defensive piece, and he's gone too. Basically everyone that logged big minutes last year is gone, so it's down to just Pinelli now. He's been playing with Brady Stonehouse quite a bit, who's one of my favorite undrafted players in the CHL. Really like high octane, undersized power forward, really fun player. Type of guy that's going to get like an ELC in a couple of years time and it's just going to be a 4th liner forever. I really like him a ton, but he's not necessarily the highest skill guy that you would want Pinelli to play with. Like for me, Stonehouse is like a 2nd liner ideally in the CHL, whereas Pinelli is the one like actual 1st liner on this team. So playing with line mates that are up on his level is going to be an issue this season. Ottawa went and traded for a 20-year-old today, spent an 8th round draft pick to get a guy that got like 40 points in 60 games last season from Owen Sound. So, and he's 6'7". So I assume they're just going to plug him next to Pinelli. So I'm not quite sure what's going to be like on the offensive front, just because there was so much talent in Ottawa last season and they've been completely stripped. And there aren't many guys in Ottawa that I think could be ready to take the mantle as like the next offensive guys. You got, in terms of drafted talent, you've got Brad Gardner of the Dallas Stars, who's a solid 2-way center, but not someone you want on a top line. Same thing with like Cooper Forster, who's a decent enough winger. I think it was a Pittsburgh pick. They're guys, but they're middle 6 pieces. So Ottawa really lacks those high-end guys, and the contention window for the 67s is closed at this point, and they're like going to enter a rebuild next season. Like my sense is they're going to scramble for a playoff spot this year before rebuilding next year. And yeah, so the timeline isn't the best for Pinelli because this isn't going to be a great team over his final seasons of CHL eligibility, but he is quite easily de facto the guy. So he's going to get minutes. I don't know if he's going to produce a ton, but he's going to play minutes. And that's the most important thing for his development, is to get reps. And he's going to likely play with a lot of players that aren't quite on his level. So that might hinder his development, or you're just going to see a massive boost in his performances once he ages up to the AHL. So that can have a variety of outcomes, but it's a pretty typical CHL situation. So I wouldn't be too concerned for his development in terms of being surrounded by players that are way below his level. But the production might not pop quite as high as people might expect of him. So just that might be a little caveat in there.
Yeah,
but,
temper your expectations, folks.
Exactly.
For
I know
production, I've been trying to temper my expectations for basically every prospect this summer, and I still find myself going, yeah, Adam Fantilli's going to get 60 points and win the Calder, but it's fine.
160 points. I raise you. It'd be great. I'd love it.
So that wraps things up for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. We've got all your news and updates about what's going on in sports. And make sure to tune in for our next episodes throughout the week here as we go back to a 5-day-a-week schedule. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope to tune in next time.